Hello everybody and welcome back to Wisconsin Wonder Garden. I'm so excited for today's episode because we're finally going to get around to our spring cleaning here in the garden. We're going to be topping off a lot of our perennial plants around the garden. Lots of flowers. We're going to be doing a couple of prunes on some of our fruit trees as well as our weeping willow tree too. And I'm going to show you guys just about how much compost you can make when taking all of these spring cuttings off of your plants. We have a pretty small yard, but I think you guys are going to be surprised with just how much material we have taken off of these plants. I'm going to show you guys a couple of examples of the plants real quick, and then I'm going to get all of the work done. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Stick around and stay tuned. Here we have Sedum Autumn Joy. It's just starting to come up underneath at the bottom, so it's definitely time to start cutting this back. This is a good example. I'll show you guys exactly what you have to do with this. You just cut it right down to the bottom, so maybe as close to the soil as you can, but make sure you don't cut any of the new growth coming up out of the ground if you want to preserve that plant. And then another good example are these phlox right here. Phlox have to be cut all the way down. We're going to be doing some pruning on our grapevine. You can do this in either early spring or late winter or in the middle of winter if you want to. Really any time is okay as long as you don't want to do your cutting in the middle of the growing season on the grapevine. Such a beautiful sign. And here in our perennial flower bed, we have garden mums over there next to our compost bin. And then we have bee balm and some other plants in here that also need to get cut down. Just about all of your perennial flowers are going to be chopped down to the ground in the springtime or in winter. I always suggest to do it in the spring because all of those flower heads will have seeds on them that are going to help feed the birds throughout the winter. So that's why I leave them on there and then do all of this work in the springtime. But all of that growth that is left there above the ground is now dead at this point. So we need to get rid of it to allow room for the new growth to come up. And that's exactly what we're doing throughout the entire garden here. I'm going to show you guys some of the bulbs and everything coming up out of the ground too. And talk to you a little bit about some of our fruit trees that we're growing now, and to also talk to you about this willow tree over here. This thing we propagated ourselves, and we're doing kind of an experiment on this because we want to keep it really small. And as many of us know, that willow trees grow fast and they grow huge. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this thing turns out many years from now. But I'll talk about that in a little bit after we do some more work and show you guys some of the plants growing around the side of the house, all of the bulbs and stuff coming up. It's good to see that our Sedum sarmatosum is growing everywhere. This stuff is crazy if you've never grown it before. It's really cool. Looks like a succulent, and it will grow, as you see right over here, just right up on top of concrete with no soil or anything, and withstands the harshest of weathers. We're growing this, and we're in southeastern Wisconsin, but I know this grows throughout our entire state, so yeah, it's a very, very hardy plant. It grows into a living carpet. It's got a gorgeous green color to it and also produces some bright yellow flowers when it blooms. Under our walkway here, we've got some alliums coming up and then a couple of other bulbs that we have planted. It's always so encouraging to see this come up in the springtime, finally get some color in the yard, and pushes us to make our gardens as beautiful as possible each year. These are Helen von Stein lamb ears. I need a little bit of a cleaning up today. We will get rid of some of this old matter from last year, and that way all the new stuff coming up has plenty of sunlight. Got a couple new hydrangeas last year. We're also going to cut those back. Usually cut them to a few feet off the ground, cutting at least 1.5 feet off of last year's growth here. This is our sailboat garden planter that we made a few years ago. Inside of this we have some stone crop, that's sedum stone crop. This back here, this is the same plant I was talking about earlier, that sedum sarmatosum. As you can tell right here, it really has filled in nicely. That's what it does when it's been growing for long enough. It's just beautiful. You can't beat that. That sedum sarmatosum is gorgeous. And then in this spot here, we have thyme planted, and we usually plant a row or two of annual flowers to really spice up this garden bed during the summertime. As you can see, we've got some cone flowers, black-eyed Susans, and then a couple of other annual flowers in there. We're gonna chop off the tops of the cone flowers and black-eyed Susans, and then the annuals we're just gonna pull right out of the ground because we don't really need all the roots in the soil right there, so we can make room for everything that will be growing this year in here. This is our front garden bed where we have some tulips, ligularia, wild ginger. We plant dahlias. We've got a couple of burning bushes that we added last year, hydrangeas, and then we just put in a crab apple tree here as well. This one is growing good and is in no need of any pruning. But on that topic, let's go back in the backyard and take a look at some of the other fruit trees we have to see if they're in need of any maintenance. This scraggly little fella here is an apple tree that we planted last year, and it just hasn't put on a lot of growth. But I hope that this year, now that it's more established, that'll do good. So I'm not going to touch this at all because I just want as much growth going into it as possible. And I don't think a whole lot has to be done with this other apple tree. If you can take a look at the bottom branches, what I did was I tied these down to get lower growth, and so as that grows it's going to stay nice and low for us, and then we're going to prune anything growing too far up and keep this thing in nice shape for fruit production. I think it's going to turn out great. The only pruning I'm going to do on this is we've got a couple of branches growing up high. We're going to cut those back to about 1.5 inches above the main branch that they're growing off of, and then that's going to be it. Eventually I'll be looking towards shaping the top of this tree over and figuring out how we can top that so it doesn't grow too tall, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet without hurting the tree too much. I don't want to just cut the top of the tree off, and so I've got to figure out how to redirect the growth so it's optimized for fruit production. Our maple tree looks fantastic. I don't want to touch that thing unless I see branches growing together and rubbing that might cause disease. Otherwise, for these maple trees, you can pretty much just leave them do their own thing. Let's go and take a look at our grapevine. All I'm going to do is follow these main points here where I have growth, trellising across, and I'm going to cut those up tight so we can help induce some fruit growth out of that. Alright, that's much better. So we just went in and trimmed all of the branches that were coming off of this main point here, and then the same thing with this next level down and all along it. That way we're going to get real strong fruit sets coming off of those main grapevines there. Onto this willow tree. Again, this is going to be a real experiment tree. we're actually going to top the top of this thing. You see maybe about right there. I'm actually going to cut the top right off and then work a lot of these stems and shape them, cutting away many of the branches that are not part of the main branch. And it's not conventional by any means, but we're just kind of experimenting with this to see how we can get it to grow in different ways and what happens when we do these things to this willow tree. So it's more for my entertainment and your guys' entertainment to see what this thing looks like in many years after trying to keep this thing low and small, whether it's going to kill the tree or if it's going to do what we want by keeping it small. It's really up in the air at this point. I haven't seen many people do this, so it's going to be rather interesting to see what we come up with. So this is before, and here is after. Again, nothing conventional about this whatsoever, but it's going to be interesting to see the results of pruning this thing back like this year after year. All right, enough of this talking because I've got some real work to do. Again, like I said, I'm going to finish up all of the yearly pruning of all of these plants, and then I'll show you guys the pile that we're left with afterwards. Right, so now I've got this giant pile of organic material from last year's growth. Should I just send it off to the city lot like most other people do, or is it possibly more beneficial to keep it right here in our backyard? Well, I'm going to show you guys what I did last year with some of this, and I'll let you be the judge of that one. In this container right here, we took material just like what you saw in a pile next to me, mixed it in with maybe 25% soil, and this is what we're left off with this year. A lot of this material is almost completely composted. Now, yes, it might take another year till it's ready in the garden, but just by doing this, you're able to create a lot of mass that you guys can use in your garden beds that's going to be extremely beneficial for the earthworms and other microbes that are living in the soil that help feed your plants. So this stuff is going to eventually turn into earthworm feed, and then we all know what those earthworms create, that black gold that you need in the garden to make sure that it thrives. Really some beautiful stuff right here. If you guys have a large compost bin, throw it in there, mix it up a little bit, or you can just create a little pile in your backyard, throw some soil over it, and before you know it, it's going to start composting. Well, there you have it. I think it goes to say it can be very beneficial to keep in your own backyard and use it as compost in the later years. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's garden tour / springtime maintenance video. I hope you guys all enjoyed. Stick around as we've got a ton of content coming up. Happy gardening as always.